Hi guys, Russell here from Homebrew Republic. Welcome to the Brew Review. Today we're taking a look at the Mangrove Jack's American Pale Ale. A couple of years ago I took a short trip to the States, and one of my prevailing memories has always been the craft APAs. Ever since then I wanted to try making one, and so that's the mission for this brew, a big hoppy American Pale Ale. We've already mentioned that we're going to use the Mangrove Jack's APA kit as a base, but one of the things that I love about kit beer brewing is there's plenty of room left for brewers to experiment with other ingredients and with the process to really create their own signature brews. So we're going to make a few changes. So the first change that I'm going to make is, wait a minute, is there something different about that guy? Sorry guys, forgot to record one little thing 2 days ago. Took a shave, now I'm back, my bad. But the first change I'm making is to use a premium brewing yeast. So I'm going to discard the yeast that comes with the kit, and I've opted to use a fermentation yeast, and it's the Safe Ale US05. And there's three main reasons why I've chosen this yeast. Number one, it's well suited to American style beers, which of course is what we're making. Number two, it's well suited to ales, as the name would suggest. And number three, it's well suited to highly hopped beers, which is of course part of our goal, a big hoppy American Pale Ale. In terms of temperature, if you do ever swap out the yeast, always go by the target temperature ranges on the yeast that you're using. And for this brew, I'm going to be aiming to ferment at a constant temperature of around about 18 to 20 degrees right throughout the fermentation period. Next up, to provide sugar for the fermentation process, I'm using a light liquid malt extract. I've always preferred liquid malt extract over dextrose because I believe it gives you a smoother finish and a little bit more body in the beer. You might have noticed this is the Black Rock product instead of a Mangrove Jack's product. Mainly I'm using this instead of the Mangrove Jack's product in this case because that was what was available to me at the time. For our big hoppy American Pale Ale, I've chose to dry hop using 3 hops: Columbus, US Cascade and Centennial. Why those 3? If you Google 3 C's hops, the story behind them is they're largely regarded as being at the foundation of the US craft beer movement. So choosing those 3 is somewhat of an ode to US craft beer, as well as being well suited to the style of beer that we're trying to make. I'm going to introduce the 3 hops at 2 separate stages of hopping, which will be at 2 separate stages of the fermentation process. If we look at the flavour profile or the hop profile of Columbus, what it's well known for is introducing a big punchy hoppiness. So I'm going to introduce about 30 grams of the Columbus hop into the fermentation approximately day 4 to give it plenty of time for that characteristic to transfer and develop in our brew. If you have a look at the flavour profile or the hop profile for the Columbus hop, in addition to giving us a big punchy hop characteristic, it's also a citrus based profile, and it's known for having very understated tones. So what we're trying to do with the Cascade and the Centennial, which also have a citrus profile, is build on that foundation and bringing them in later in the fermentation process. We're hoping to enhance those flavours and certainly create some big bold citrusy notes in terms of the aromas coming off the top of the beer. So the only thing left to do is get this brew on. The fermentation process will take around about 10 to 14 days. After that I will leave it for 4 to 6 weeks to mature in the bottles, and then I'll see you guys on the other side for a taste test. Cheers!
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey guys, welcome to my garage. I'm not really going to show you around, mainly because it's a real mess in here, but what we have here is our big hoppy American Pale Ale, and you can probably see there we've got a bit of a bubble going. So we're now on day 4, so I'm ready to pitch the first phase of hops, which I originally said was 30 grams of Columbus. I've got about 35 grams, so that's ready to go. So what I did as well, the current temperature is sitting at around about 17 degrees. So the recommended temperature range that was on the yeast packet was to ferment between 12 and 25, but the ideal range was 15 to 22. So what I did was, the brew was about 30 to 33 when it was first kind of set because of the boiling water on the bottom. So I chucked it in the fridge, and I just used the fridge to cool it down. Once the brew hit about 24, I pitched the yeast. So the general line of thinking there is pitching your yeast where you got the temperature up a smidge on the ideal range, or at the top of the ideal range, so that you help activate the yeast and get it working. And I then let the brew continue to come down, and I think I stopped it at 15 degrees. What you can see at the bottom there is my heat pad. So at the moment, the heat pad's just working on a timer, so I'm turning it on for about 8 hours overnight between, I think it's 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., which is covering the coldest part of the night. And probably the key thing there, actually I've got it going on for an hour in the afternoon as well, just to give it a bit of a bump through the middle of the day. And what I'm sort of seeing is the temperature holding between a range of about 16 to 19 degrees. But as you can see, it's not gone crazy, which is good. It's just got a really nice, slow, steady fermentation going, which is what I was aiming for. So let's get this lid off and check out what it looks like on the inside. So as a general rule as well, always avoid opening your fermentation up, because every time you open it up you are creating the risk of oxidation and or sort of bacteria getting in. So you want to open it up as little as possible. But what we can see there is a nice little level of activity. What I'm going to do is take my hops, as I mentioned, 35 grams. Okay, and I'm just sprinkling them over the top. Personal preference here. I used to use like a hop sock or a hop cage, but lately what I've been doing is going full commando. So just chucking them in without any kind of container. And the argument for that approach is that what you're doing is you're increasing the surface area contact between the brew and the hop, and therefore increasing the effectiveness of the transfer of the characteristics that you're looking for, both in terms of aroma or flavour. Downside to that is you do sometimes get a bit of organic matter sort of floating around in your brew, but you can deal with that using a clarifier, some finings, and or cold crashing your brew before you bottle, and or racking off, and or using a sediment filter on your bottling bucket. So, plenty of ways to get around that one. There we go, guys. That's fermentation well underway. So the brew is holding at around about 19 degrees in terms of its fermentation temperature. What I've done here is I've poured a trial glass and taken a gravity reading, specific gravity reading. Specific gravity is 1.012. So we're currently on day 9 of the fermentation, and what I was looking to do was to add the second round of hops, or the second phase of hops, which was approximately 10 grams each of US Cascade and Centennial. So I've got those ready. What we're going to do is crack the top, have a look at what's happening inside, and drop that second round of hops in. Okay. So a lot of that's the fermentation, some of it's the hops. You can see a few bubbles in there, so it's bubbling away. So definitely in the mid to late stages of fermentation. So I'm going to go ahead and, same as last time, sprinkle these hops just through the top. All done. Wasn't many of them to go around. And I'm going to screw this top back on. So that's us. So like I said, we're day 9. What I will do is probably take this out to around about day 14 in total. So on day 12 I will check the specific gravity, and I'll be looking for it to be down around about 1.05. As long as it's there, I will be dropping in my finings, and then on day 13 I'll start the process of cold crashing before bottling on around about day 14. So that's us. Cheers. Hey guys, welcome back for the official taste test of our big hoppy American APA. Bottle, glass. Should we do this? Right, the pour. And there we have it. Ladies and gentlemen, that is really, really beautiful. So if we were looking at an SRM chart, I would guess somewhere between 19 and 21. And if you were asking me to describe the colour, I would say a very rich, if not slightly burnt caramel, but really, really nice. The clarity, you can see it there. I did say I used findings, and I did say that I cold crashed, did say that I used direct off, all that kind of good stuff. It works. Really beautiful finish. Okay, the aromas. It's really, really interesting. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna say understated. Definitely there, definitely not hiding, definitely know where they are, but understated. All right, what we're getting kind of on the top is a really earthy or herbal tone, which I think has partly been built up by the Columbus hop in particular. Definitely some citrus on the back notes coming through loud and clear. And you can get the malts if you really kind of work hard and look for them. One of the things I like about this is you almost get something slightly different about the smell every time you take a whiff. It's really nice. Okay, that description of the aromas pretty much sets the tone for the flavour as well. So, unsurprisingly, very much a hop forward flavour. The very front of the flavour is definitely that herbal, that earthy tone, which comes through really, really loud and clear. I do think we built that up with the Columbus hop, which was the hop we used earliest and the hop we used the most of. The next hop, which was Centennial, also has hints of pine that may well be coming through and I'm just not picking it up. Certainly following through on that earthy sort of herbal tone, very loud and clear are the citrus tones, which we were intentionally trying to build up. And then kind of sitting underneath that are our malty characteristics. Almost right on the back. One thing about this beer, which surprised me a little bit, is it's very, very light bodied. So I think I was expecting something with a little bit more body to it. Not saying it's a bad thing, but that flavour profile and the light body just makes it incredibly easy drinking. It's very crisp, very refreshing, and will certainly be good on a summer afternoon. One thing I noticed, so this one here is now 7 or 8 weeks old. When I started drinking it at 4 weeks, it was pretty much all hop in terms of the flavour profile. The hop flavours, and in particular that really earthy, that really herbal tone was coming through a lot more strongly, and was a lot more dominant overall. And what's happened is the hops have just settled down a little bit. I think that it's just matured into the beer. I actually prefer it now, and I've said that a lot with other brews, that around that 6 to 7 to 8, if not 9 week mark, I enjoy the beer a lot more. I feel like everything's just mellowed. I feel like it's a really smooth combination between, or a transition between the hop flavours into the beer. Yeah, it's nice. I like it. Probably wasn't a very technically correct articulation, but it's good. And probably the biggest thing I noticed is leaving it later. Earlier on, it was really hard to pick up those multi flavours, whereas now they're actually there and I can taste them, which is nice. So in terms of what my friends have said, because that's the most important bit, I got a friend up the road. He is very much an IPA and a kind of an ale fan. He took straight to it. His response was, "It's really nice. What is it?" Another buddy who I think he likes Pilsners, likes his darker beers. He liked it. Didn't get much specific out of him, but just sent me a message with a thumbs up. And actually shared it with one of my colleagues for the first time. It was the first time I shared any of my beer with him. And his response was, interestingly, a little bit of a story. We were at the driving range beforehand, and I'd taken the beer to give him at the driving range, not at the driving range, but at the driving range to take home. And when we were at the driving range, he took me to one I hadn't been to before, and they served beer, which, to my way of thinking, is the best combination ever, having a pint and being able to hit some golf balls, which I enjoyed. So by the way, I was drinking one of these beers, and I was like, I recognise this hop flavour coming through, and it was the Columbus hop. And I said to him, "Do you like that beer?" And he said no. I was like, "Oh, okay." So anyway, I gave him my beer knowing it tasted a bit like that beer, and I did warn him. I actually gave him 2 different types, so he had a preference to the other one. But what I found interesting, and this was a little bit for me as well, when I tried this for the first time, that really, really strong herbal and earthy tone threw me a bit. I wasn't quite expecting it. I think it's grown on me, particularly as it's settled down. But I would say it's probably an acquired taste. You're either going to like it or you're not. So I'd probably, maybe just think about that before you do this brew. But overall, really, really successful brew. Some of the thoughts that I had, hoppiness. I would describe the level of hoppiness we got into this as a light to mid. The goal was big and hoppy. Could you do something there? You could. We only put, say, 60 grams of hops in. You could increase the hops. You could push them up to 100, maybe more. I might not do that by itself. One of the characteristics, or on the kit, it was described as being a really, really well balanced kit. And the hoppiness that we've sort of added into it, I feel like it hasn't thrown, I feel like it hasn't thrown that balance. It's still a really nice brew. It still feels like it's all tied together really well. I feel like if you built up the hoppiness too much, especially being a slightly light-bodied beer, it might throw it out a bit. The other thing I would think about doing is, if I really wanted to build up those malt characteristics and potentially the body, what I would consider doing is using 2 of the APA kits. So holding the recipe constant and just adding 2 of the kits, which in theory will help us bring up the alcohol volume a little bit. It'll help us build up the body, help us build up those malt characteristics. Now, if I did that, I'd also be more inclined to lift up the volume of hops to potentially anywhere between 100 and 150, which would change it quite dramatically, if not, turn it into a double. So something to play with if you're at home, but that is the beauty of kit brewing. There is plenty of room left to experiment for brewers. So all that said, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Enjoyed this brew. My friends liked it. Keeping the recipe. The recipe, by the way, I've called New Zealand American Pale Ale. after the kit, which was from the Mangrove Jack's New Zealand Brewers series. So, cheers.